Let's talk about inflation. Well, it just keeps getting worse and it's still rising. Now, pretty inconvenient for the Richard Wolves and the socialists or the Elizabeth Warrens of the world because they were blaming it on greed and capitalism and just greedy companies wanted to charge more and have any excuse. But you can see that inflation is rising across the board. So it's basically all companies feel like, oh, it's an inflationary time, and then we can all raise prices like in unison. I mean, somebody, I own some real estate, right? I'm not some like crazy big company or anything, but I have a choice in the prices I set personally, a few of them. I'm part of the market a little bit, right? And I always, no matter what the inflation is or what the political narrative is, I'm trying to set it at the highest price possible. A Democrat, Republican, whoever's in office, whatever the time is, I always try to make the most amount of money. Always. But here's the thing. The consumer can only pay a certain amount or is willing to pay a certain amount, and after that it won't get rented. So there is a you can only set it as high as people are willing to pay, and that's what happens. That's what I do. I set a little higher, see if anybody bites. If there's much interest, well, I just lower it until the classic supply and demand chart, there is a person that's willing to rent my apartment for that price. And unfortunately, people want to blame it on supply chains. People want to blame it on greed. Probably have never ran a little apartment before, so they don't have any. I mean, they're just talking, out of nowhere. Because inflation, all the prices are rising. Well, if all the prices are rising means consumers can bid up the prices, and if the prices didn't move up, there would be complete shortages. So where's all this fresh money coming from? Well, it's the Federal Reserve, obviously. I mean, and unfortunately for Biden and the Democrats, it's all these political narratives are wrong about Obama fixing economy, Trump fixing economy, Biden, whatever. Yes, this inflation is getting really bad under Biden. If Trump would have been reelected, it would have been pretty much the same inflation. I mean, yes, maybe he wouldn't have passed one extra stimulus, but how much it was going to come from the cumulative actions of all what the Federal Reserve done over the years. But obviously the American voters are idiots, and not to defend Biden in any way. I mean, he should be kicked out of office for sure. He's horrible, but the inflation that you're seeing is caused by the Federal Reserve. I mean, of course, it's made worse by the Democrats and trying to spend more money without just by borrowing and printing the money, but still, it's very inconvenient. This narrative is very inconvenient for the Democrats. We have a site Politico, which is probably, I guess, center left or whatever. Yes, the diehard liberals at the New York Times, the Paul Krugmans of the world are going to try to spin it. They're going to spin it that, oh, look, the workers' wages are rising faster than the prices and this and that. Oh, this is great. Look at these wins for Joe Biden, this and that. Like, anybody that's a little bit objective in the news media will be like, well, yeah, wages are going up, but we haven't seen for example, rents. Rents lag house prices, and house prices have jumped up so much more, so rents are going to be ratcheted up, or just, every staple of necessity of life, people's wages increase, but it's very, very disconcerting. I mean, I think pretty sure a lot of these prices are going to go higher than wages. So people are seeing a drop in standard of living, unfortunately, to their fucked up policies. The article goes, inflation hit another 4-decade high. January, it showed a little sign of slowing down, suggesting that surging prices will continue to dog President Biden's economy. Virtually every category of consumer prices, from food to women's clothing to rent and airlines, went up. Now, the Richard Wolffs of the world, the communists, would say they're all colluding at the same time. This is just an excuse. They hear about inflationary times, and I guess in unison, they all try to raise prices together. But of course, that doesn't make any sense. Because they can raise prices. The companies always had the power to raise prices to whatever the hell they wanted. But they just wouldn't sell many units, so they had to lower them back down. Or like a competitor would just lower the prices, and they had to get in line with the actual market price. Otherwise, almost nobody would buy from them unless they did some incredible marketing job that their product is so much better. The Labor Department's report that consumer prices rose higher than expected, 0.6%, for the second month in a row, increased speculation in financial markets that the Federal Reserve might act more aggressively in its campaign of interest rate increases, which are expected to begin next month. But the central bank may be reluctant to move too fast for fear of spooking investors. Translation: not spooking investors. If you read between the lines, it's basically the economy and the government and everybody is so indebted that any tiny little increase in the interest rates would just bankrupt everybody and cause the economy to plunge into a recession. That's what they really should have wrote. In any case, Fed policymakers will get another consumer price index reading before they decide how to approach that next rate setting meeting in mid-March, blah, blah, blah. Today's report not encouraging, but it's premature to conclude that the Fed will move next month. So they're still waiting for like the supply chains to clear up, which is why are the prices of just local things moving up that are not even imported from China? Why real estate is not imported from China? Why is real estate through the roof? It said if inflation continues to remain very high, the Fed will have little choice but then to move fast. Well, they won't do that. Let's look at what I've learned from Tuesday's CPI report. 7.5%. Oh, and by the way, this 7.5%, that's a complete bullshit fabrication. It's not. It's like 10 or to 15%. The 7.5% probably leaves out energy and also the rent. They concocted a consumer equivalent rent that asks people what they would rent their place for if they had to rent, which regular people aren't keeping up. I mean, it's rigged. It's designed to be low. And it just like really bothers me when like you listen to podcasts or political pundits and there's like, oh, well, just dropping 7.5, blah, blah. Like, no. The prices that you like of the things that you buy for an average household or an individual has gone up way more than 7.5%. This is a joke. Highest we've seen, and it's not even like they would say, like the article would say, highest we've seen since 1982. Well, they probably measured CPI with a different formula in 1982. If you use the 1984 formula, it's probably 20%. And it's the second report in a row where the numbers has broken 7%, but it's also telling that we're all largely new. Over the last 12 months, prices have gone up a lot. The worst numbers for both the Fed and the White House is that inflation rose 0.06% from December to January because, and by the way, 7% inflation, but mortgage rates, like people can get mortgage rates at like 3 or 2.9%. So you're borrowing money at 2.9% for 30 years, but inflation is running around 10. You're getting paid money to borrow, and somebody's really getting screwed, and it's not the banks, that's for sure. The worst number for both the Fed and the White House is that inflation rose 0.6% December to January, because that gives us a better sense of what's happening now rather than what was going on over a year ago. That's the same pace that grew. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, transitory no more. Starting in April 2021 into the summer, when inflation started as an ascent, the price spike was driven by just a few categories like cars, which have gotten a lot more scarce because of semiconductor shortage. The central bank expected its heightened inflation only to be temporary, transitory. Fed Chair Jerome Powell preferred the word because it was being driven by production and shipping delays. Yeah, right. But the supply problems haven't been resolved, but prices are starting to rise across industries. Used cars are still a big chunk of the increase over the past year, having risen 40% in that time. But the increase is a broad base, with virtually all component indexes showing increase over the past 12 months. Grocery costs rose slightly faster than prices for people eating in January 1st. But food overall continues to get markedly more expensive. Women's outerwear prices surged 6.5% last month, while dishes and flour rose 4%. Well, what about labor? What about labor? If you have to pay, if the government pays people not to work, to sit at home and give stimulus checks, and some people just retire and just not go to work. I mean, labor is the highest component of a price, usually. Airline prices also increased 3.4%, but on the bright side for travelers, hotel and motel prices saw a 4% price drop. Another silver lining, new car prices stopped rising while used car prices slowed their ascent. Meanwhile, rents also grew a strong, steady 0.5%, trending that's expected to keep pushing up inflation readings. Yeah, I don't think we're done with inflation. But I also see America is so indebted and printed so much money that would become more like Japan, with aging and decreasing population. That's very deflationary. So who knows how high the prices are gonna have to rise before they kind of plateau, but it definitely won't take 7% like it did in the 70s for the Volcker when he had to raise that high to break the inflation. I mean, here just like 1% increase, because the economy is so indebted. A 1% increase would probably will tap the brakes and throw us into a recession, unfortunately.